Welcome into the Dallas Cowboys fans. I'm Tom Downey, and today we've got a deep dive on two intriguing names heading into Cowboys training camp, safety Donovan Wilson and tight end Luke Schoonmaker. But before we jump in, a quick note: at the time of filming, we're just 639 subscribers away from hitting the massive milestone of 218,000 subs here on the channel. If you're a die-hard Cowboys fan and want free, daily coverage of everything happening with America's team, this is the place for you. Hit that sub button and help us cross that finish line. Now, let's get into the Donovan Wilson situation. Nick Harris of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram recently continued his in-depth position group breakdowns and labeled Wilson as a bubble player on the current depth chart. That alone raised eyebrows. Here's what he wrote. Despite being one of the longest tenured players on the team and a mainstay in the defensive backfield over the last 6 seasons, Donovan Wilson has young players gunning for his spot in 2025. Entering a contract year, the Cowboys could decide to cut ties with Wilson and save $7 million in cap space going into the season. Now that's a big statement, especially when you consider Wilson just recently returned from off-season knee surgery and was limited during OTAs and minicamp. But reports indicate he hit the ground running once camp started, trying to hold off the young talent creeping up behind him. This is the most credible, maybe they move on from Donovan noise we've heard this off-season. But even so, it's not exactly concrete. There are some big ifs baked in, like whether or not Wilson's play dips significantly, or if someone like Marquise Bell or Juanyeh Thomas takes a major leap in camp. The logic that the Cowboys could have cut Wilson after June 1st to save $7 million doesn't fully hold, because the same cap savings would have applied before that date if they designated him a post-June 1 release. So if they wanted to purely save money, they would have done it already. That suggests they're still evaluating his on-field value. And let's be honest, when Wilson is on, when he's flying around the field making tackles, timing blitzes perfectly, and showing that X-Factor spark he's flashed in the past, he makes a noticeable difference in the Cowboys' defense. But when he's off, he's a coverage liability, especially against tight ends, and that's where the doubt starts to creep in. Nick Harris listed Malik Hooker, Juanyeh Thomas, and Marquise Bell as roster locks. All three bring something unique. Hooker is the veteran with range. Thomas is a special teams ace and developmental talent. Bell just signed a multi-year extension, and he's been turning heads with his versatility. If there's a fourth safety with real momentum, it's Elijah Clark, an undrafted free agent the Cowboys liked enough to give a nice chunk of change. Clark might start on the practice squad, but if he shows out in camp and the preseason, while Wilson struggles or loses his starting role, things could get interesting. Suddenly, Wilson isn't safety 1 or 2, he's safety 4, with a $7 million cap hit. And at that point, the front office may ask themselves, is it worth it? Not from a money-saving standpoint, but from a value-to-role standpoint. So here's the real question. Do the Cowboys see enough from the young guys to feel comfortable moving on from a guy like Wilson, who brings leadership and veteran presence, but also inconsistency? If Wilson ends up as the 3rd or even 4th safety on the depth chart by the end of August, the move to cut him wouldn't be shocking. But if he maintains a starting spot or even a top rotational role, his experience and physicality might be too valuable to part with. Let me know your thoughts. K for keep, C for cut. Drop it in the comments below. Now let's pivot to the tight end room, where Nick Harris also weighed in. He listed Luke Schoonmaker as safe, but not exactly locked in when it comes to his role. It's clear that Jake Ferguson is T1, no questions asked there. But for the TU2 spot, it's shaping up to be a real battle. and not in the way you might expect. Harris pointed out that Brevin Spann-Ford, an undrafted free agent from last year, is pushing hard to overtake Schoonmaker for that backup job. Spann-Ford has received a ton of praise from the coaching staff and media at OTAs and minicamp. In fact, offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer even said Spann-Ford already took the leap. That's not coach-speak fluff. That's meaningful. What's concerning is we haven't heard that same level of excitement about Schoonmaker. He's been quiet. Too quiet. And for a guy who was a second-round pick just last year, that's a red flag. We're talking about a guy the Cowboys hoped would step in and be a quality all-around tight end good blocker, athletic enough to be a threat in the passing game. And while yes, he's a better athlete than Spann-Ford on paper, the production just hasn't been there yet. Spann-Ford, on the other hand, is massive, 6'7", 270 pounds. And while he still has room to grow as a pass catcher, he's already a better blocker than Schoonmaker, according to multiple camp observers. And when it comes to the TE2 role in Dallas, blocking matters. It's arguably more important than receiving at that spot. Schoonmaker hasn't stood out in that area. Per PFF, his run blocking grade wasn't impressive. And while grading systems aren't everything, the tape hasn't countered that either. Spann-Ford still needs polish in the passing game, but if he can at least be reliable as a blocker and a short yardage option, that could be enough to bump Schoonmaker down the depth chart. And if that happens? Well, Schoonmaker's not going anywhere this year due to cap structure, but his long-term outlook becomes a lot murkier. This tight end battle is one of the most underrated storylines heading into Oxnard. It's a classic case of high draft pedigree versus rising underdog. Brevin Spann-Ford has the size, the strength, and the momentum. Schoonmaker has the athletic traits, the draft investment, and the pressure. One of them is going to step up. The other might find himself on the outside looking in, not off the roster, but certainly off the field. Let me know who you're backing in this battle. BSF for Brevin Spann-Ford, LS for Luke Schoonmaker. And as always, stay locked in with the Cowboys Report for more training camp battles, roster news, and everything in between. Hit that sub button because the grind doesn't stop.